In the year 1658, Oxford stood as one of the most important centers of learning and religious authority in England. The city occupied a strategic position along the Thames and Cherwell rivers, controlling trade routes and ideas in equal measure. Its colleges and churches dominated the landscape, their stone towers rising above timber-framed houses and narrow streets. This was a city shaped by centuries of scholarship, political upheaval, and the constant tension between town and gown. Oxford in 1658 existed in the shadow of civil war and revolution, yet its daily rhythms continued with remarkable persistence. The university had survived the execution of King Charles 9 years earlier, and now operated under the watchful eye of Oliver Cromwell's protectorate. To understand Oxford at this moment is to witness a community navigating between tradition and transformation, where ancient privileges met new political realities. What made Oxford particularly distinctive in 1658 was the degree to which academic life penetrated every aspect of the city's physical and social fabric. The colleges did not simply exist within Oxford, they were Oxford. Nearly every significant building, every parcel of valuable land, every source of wealth and employment traced back to the university and its constituent colleges. The townspeople lived in a space they could never fully control, their commercial activities regulated and restricted by institutions that answered to no local authority. This created a permanent state of uneasy coexistence, where resentment simmered beneath the surface of daily transactions. The approach to Oxford from any direction revealed the city's character before you entered its gates. The flat Thames Valley spread outward, crisscrossed with drainage channels and meadows prone to flooding. Church spires punctured the skyline at intervals, with the Tower of St. Mary the Virgin standing tallest among them. Closer in, the stone walls of college buildings became visible, their battlements and gates suggesting fortification as much as education. The roads leading into the city passed through suburbs of modest timber houses, workshops, and inns that served travelers making their way to London or the West Country. Carts laden with wool, grain, and firewood converged on the city's entrances, where porters and watchmen monitored the flow of goods and people. Entering through the North Gate brought you immediately into a world of narrow lanes and overhanging upper stories. The streets ran with waste and rainwater, channeled along central gutters that emptied into the rivers. Buildings leaned toward each other across the passages, blocking much of the sunlight even at midday. The smell of wood smoke, animal dung, and brewing ale hung in the air. Shopfronts opened directly onto the street, their goods displayed on boards or hanging from hooks. Bakers, tailors, stationers, and brewers conducted business in spaces barely large enough for their trade. The noise was constant, hammering, shouting, the clatter of hooves on stone, the creak of cart wheels, and the ringing of bells marking the hours and calling scholars to prayer. The college buildings stood apart from this commercial chaos, separated by walls and gates that were locked at night. Each college formed its own enclosed world, organized around quadrangles of stone or brick. These courtyards provided ordered space where scholars could move between chapel, hall, and chambers without encountering the disorder of the streets. The architecture spoke of permanence and hierarchy. Gothic windows and doorways recalled medieval foundations, while newer buildings showed classical influences brought back from continental Europe. The interiors were austere by modern standards but represented considerable wealth in their time. Wooden paneling lined the walls of halls and libraries. Long tables ran the length of dining spaces, where meals were taken in strict order of rank. The libraries held collections of manuscripts and printed books that represented centuries of accumulated knowledge, chained to desks to prevent theft. The scholars themselves formed a distinct population within the city. They wore academic dress that marked their status. Gowns of varying lengths and styles indicated whether a man was an undergraduate, graduate, or fellow of a college. Most were young, many arriving in their mid-teens to begin their studies. They lived under strict regulations that governed nearly every aspect of their behavior. Attendance at morning and evening prayers was mandatory. Meals were communal. Movement outside college walls required permission. The curriculum centered on classical languages, logic, rhetoric, and theology, taught through lectures and disputations that followed methods unchanged for generations. Students were forbidden from entering taverns, playing cards, or associating with townspeople beyond necessary commercial transactions. These rules were enforced with fines, public punishments, and ultimately expulsion. The relationship between university and town was defined by legal privileges that dated back centuries. The university held jurisdiction over its own members, meaning scholars accused of crimes were tried in university courts rather than by town magistrates. The university controlled the licensing of alehouses and supervised weights and measures used in the market. It could inspect the quality of bread and ale sold to scholars and impose penalties on merchants who violated regulations. These powers generated constant friction. Townspeople resented their subordinate position, while university authorities viewed merchants and craftsmen as threats to discipline and moral order. Riots between students and townspeople erupted periodically, often triggered by disputes over prices, insults, or competition for the attention of the city's women. The streets outside the college walls supported a complex economy built around serving the university's needs. Stationers produced and sold the materials of scholarship: paper, ink, quills, and books. Tailors made academic gowns and repaired them when they wore thin. Laundresses took in the linens and clothing of scholars whose colleges did not provide such services. Servants and cooks worked in college kitchens and chambers, forming a permanent underclass within the academic community. Tavern keepers and brewers supplied the ale that remained the primary beverage for all social classes. Beyond these direct services, the presence of hundreds of scholars with some disposable income supported markets in luxury goods, imported wines, tobacco, fine textiles, and books printed in London or abroad. Religious life shaped the rhythm of each day with relentless regularity. Chapel services began before dawn and continued at intervals until evening. The sound of bells calling communities to prayer created a constant background noise that structured time itself. Under Cromwell's protectorate, these services had been stripped of their traditional ceremonial elements. There was no organ music, no elaborate vestments, no images or decorations that might suggest Catholic influence. Sermons dominated the services, often extending for an hour or more. The content was strictly Reformed Protestant, emphasizing scripture, predestination, and the moral duties of believers. The changes had been imposed gradually over the previous 15 years, as royal control gave way to parliamentary authority and then to military rule. Some welcomed the simplifications as a return to pure Christianity. Others mourned the loss of ritual and beauty that had defined their worship for generations. The wealthiest and most influential colleges, Magdalen, Christ Church, New College, and All Souls, dominated the university's governance and owned vast estates throughout England. Their fellows held positions for life and lived in comfortable circumstances compared to the townspeople outside their walls. They dined on meat and fish while laborers survived on bread and pottage. They slept in private chambers while working families crowded into single rooms. This inequality was accepted as natural and divinely ordained. The purpose of education was not to elevate the common people but to train a small elite for positions in the church and government. The sons of gentlemen and merchants came to Oxford to acquire polish and connections as much as learning. Many left without completing degrees, having spent their time building relationships that would serve them throughout their lives. Yet Oxford in 1658 was not a place of perfect order and unchallenged authority. The political upheavals of the previous 2 decades had shaken assumptions and created opportunities for different voices. Religious radicals questioned whether universities served any useful purpose or simply perpetuated privilege and superstition. Some argued that the endowments of colleges should be confiscated and redistributed to fund parish schools or support the poor. These ideas found little support among those who benefited from the existing system, but they circulated in pamphlets and sermons, adding to the sense of uncertainty about the future. The university had survived by adapting, purging royalist fellows, accepting parliamentary visitors, and demonstrating loyalty to each successive regime. This flexibility came at a cost to intellectual independence, but it preserved the institution. The rivers that bounded the city on multiple sides served as both resource and threat. The Thames, known locally as the Isis where it flowed past Oxford, provided water for drinking, washing, and manufacturing. Mills along its banks ground grain into flour. The river also served as a highway for goods moving between Oxford and London. Barges carried university books, college wine, of participating in traditions that connected present to past and would extend into an unknowable future. It also meant that individual suffering and injustice could be overlooked as temporary disturbances in a fundamentally stable order. Looking at Oxford in 1658 from the perspective of centuries later, we see a community at a turning point it could not yet recognize. Within 2 years, Cromwell would be dead and the monarchy restored. The university would shift again, purging those who had supported the protectorate and welcoming back royalist scholars. The colleges would grow wealthier, building new quadrangles and libraries that would define the Oxford we know today. But the fundamental patterns visible in 1658 would persist: the tension between town and gown, the assumption that education belonged to a privileged minority, the daily rhythms of chapel, hall, and study. Walking those streets today, with their tour buses and coffee shops, requires imagination to peel back the layers and see the narrower lanes, the timber frames, the scholars in their gowns hurrying between lectures. Yet something of that earlier Oxford remains in the stones themselves, in the courtyards still organized around the same principles, in the continuation of traditions that would have been recognizable to someone transported from 1658 to the present. What do you imagine when you think of Oxford in this period? What aspects of its history would you most want to witness? Share your thoughts in the comments below.